Hi, and welcome back to the Procurement Signal. Let's talk about the exact position some of you might be in right now. Growth is tight. Your executives are beating the drum for aggressive cost reductions, all to bake in for the next budget cycle. Your inbox is flooded with mandates to renegotiate supplier contracts, slash unit prices, and defend margins. But at the same time, their legal and ESG teams are handing you a growing list of non negotiables when it comes to sourcing. Things like traceability, conflict minerals, environmental standards, forced labor checks. If it feels like you're being told to hit the gas pedal and the brake pedal at the same time, you're not alone. Here's why a lot of category leads get stuck. They try to defend ethical sourcing using moral arguments. It's the greater good, it's the right thing to do. But in a cost cutting cycle, moral arguments don't survive a budget review. So if you want to protect your supply chain and keep your seat at the executive table, you need a commercial narrative shift. You need to rephrase ethical sourcing as risk management and protection of your bottom line. So today, I'm walking through how to execute such a strategy in your next category or sourcing review. So let's get into it.
Welcome to the Procurement Signal, the place for curious supply chain professionals ready to develop. Every week, we dive straight into how modern teams are transforming supplier relationships, elevating vendor management, tackling risk, and driving real sustainability impact. If you are ready to move out of a back office function and into a strategic powerhouse, you are in the right place. This is your signal. Amplify what you can be.
So to execute this strategy, I'm going to break this into three parts. So part A is the work that you have to do. So there's a three-step framework there. Part B is convincing your executives using the data that you got from part A. And part C is renegotiating with your incumbents, with the better suppliers that have their due diligence covered. So imagine you manage a 50 million spend category. Let's just say that's in consumer electronics or hardware. You are manufacturing in Asia and your biggest export market is the US. Now, when your management demands a 15% reduction, cost reduction across your category, how do you handle it without taking on massive operational risk? So let's get into part A. Step one of part A is translate the regulations into commercial boundaries. So don't get bogged down by legal jargon. Translate the major import laws directly into business language. So, using our example of manufacturing in Asia with exporting to the US, let's just say your three biggest regulations are the Uyghur Forced Labor Prevention Act, the Conflict Minerals Act, which is also known as Dodd Frank, and TSCA and PFAS. Now, the Uyghur Forced Labor Prevention Act and conflict minerals are more related to forced labor and removing forced labor from the supply chain. PFAS is related to environmental protection. So, this is chemical compliance requirements that can freeze your hardware or electronics imports if your vendor disclosures fall short. Now, the task for procurement is not to know these regulations line by line, but it is to understand what are the boundaries of sourcing. So, what are the non-negotiables? What do your vendors actually need to do? And that is what you need to capture as part of step one. Step two, build your category license to operate narrative. So take these regulations and frame them directly in your sourcing strategy. You can say something like, our supply chain compliance isn't an afterthought, It's our license to operate, our license to trade. A cheap, unvetted component does not save us money. Instead, it puts the entire market entry strategy at risk. So, how do you enforce this with your suppliers? You can do a few things. First up, no traceability, no purchase order. So, you got to ensure that your suppliers have their tier ones and tier two supply chain mapping all done. This is a mandatory requirement as part of your RFPs. If there's no sub tier visibility, it's a disqualification. You could also have approved material list. So you restrict component vendors strictly to pre-screened smelters or the ones that have completed their due diligence to validate their material databases. You could also bake in contractual insurance. So you ensure that in your MSAs and your master service agreements, they include clear indemnification for you as the client, just so that your suppliers absorb the financial impact of port delays caused solely by missing paperwork or compliance issues on their end. Step 3, quantify the downside in real currency. So, whatever currency you work with. Numbers talk. So, when presenting to executive leadership, turn compliance gaps into financial liabilities. So, what type of liabilities might you have? Well, customs detention. So, if inventory is held at the border, it means storage and legal fees, which would cost your organization tens of thousands of dollars every single day. Now, while your goods are stuck at port, your customers, and if they're retail customers, they're not just going to wait around while your goods or their products are stuck. A delayed shipment triggers immediate breach of contract penalties and lost shelf space. Worst case scenario, blacklisting. Getting slapped with a withhold release order means total shutdown in the market. After you've run through part A, so you've finished your research and you've got all the data, all the information, now it's time to bring this into the room where it actually matters. And this is the vendor evaluation and pitch to management. So let's run a scenario. You run an RFP for your hardware components. You have two suppliers. You have supplier A, who's your incumbent. This supplier is fully vetted, 100% supply chain transparency within reason, and their unit price is $100. So that's 10 million category spend. Supplier B, which is a new vendor, this is the challenger, they come in at an aggressive quote of $80, which is 8 million spent. So on paper, that's an instant $2 million cost reduction or 20% savings. Now, management will see this and they'll go, when are we starting with supplier B? This is where the strategic sourcing manager or the category manager shifts the conversation from the unit cost to a risk adjusted total cost of ownership. So you take the data to your manager, to your management, and deliver this pitch. Supplier B looks $2 million dollars cheaper at a unit cost level. But because they cannot map their sub tier raw materials or demonstrate compliance or show transparency in their supply chain, we face a high risk of customs detention. If a single shipment gets flagged, we lose inventory, we stall production, and the $2 million dollars in cost savings, that's gone. Supplier B isn't saving us $2 million. Dollars. They're asking us to risk 12 million dollars to chase paper savings. The result, your executive or management backs your recommendation to reject supplier B. But that's not the end of the story. There is part C. Now, as the category or sourcing lead, your job isn't done. You just saved the business from a high risk vendor, but you still need to hit your cost out targets. Here's how you use supplier B's low bid as commercial leverage with supplier A. So let's scale this up to a $50 million contract. So supplier A is at $50 a unit, which is 50 million spent, and supplier B is $40 a unit, 40 million spend. But that's carrying a 97.5 million in unmitigated risk. You take supplier B's $40 benchmark and sit down at the negotiating table with supplier A. The conversation may go, we value your supply chain transparency, it protects our market access. However, market benchmarks for this component have dropped to $40. We want to keep 100% of our volume with you, but we need your help in closing the gap to protect our category margins. So let's talk how we can structure this better. Now, you could use some genuine strategic negotiation levers. So instead of just squeezing supplier A on their margins, you could offer commercial trade offs. These commercial trade offs could include volume and long term. So you can offer to extend their contract instead of 1 year to maybe 3 years or 5 years under an exclusive deal. This offers the supplier predictability. Now, they could use that predictability or that guarantee with their sub tier suppliers in locking in volume discounts and also keeping all the compliance information they need from their supply chain. By approaching the negotiation strategically, supplier A agrees to lower their unit cost from $50 to $43.50. So let's look at the final scorecard. Your baseline category spend was at 50 million. The final negotiated spend is at 43.5 million. Your total net savings is 6.5 million. That is a 13% real cost out. You've got a 3 year contract, and your regulatory or port detention risk is mitigated. It's zero. So, my friends, this is how you shift the narrative of ethical sourcing as risk management. You didn't take on a reckless new supplier, you didn't settle for high incumbent prices, but you delivered millions of dollars in real bankable annual savings while keeping your supply chain 100% compliant and audit ready. You turn compliance into commercial leverage. That's it from today's episode of the Procurement Signal. If you found this useful, please share it with a friend or a colleague, and I'll see you on the next one.
Thanks for tuning in to The Signal. Visit www.procurementsignal.com for more information. Check out our other videos on our YouTube channel.